Hi, this is Black Tea News, and this is Christina Barr. And unfortunately, it's a very solemn day as we're going to be talking about what happened yesterday in Texas. But I thank you for joining me as we assess everything that's been going on, the response from the president, the response from Beto just did something wackadoodle, crazy, disgusting, and some of the reactions and what we can do and actually construct a situation. So I thank you for joining me today. Host Christina Barr for Black Tea News. Hello, hello, hello. As I just said, we're going to be talking about what happened in Texas, which probably happened maybe as we were probably finishing up yesterday on the air to go home and to start looking at more stuff online and stuff that was breaking. Just this kind of stuff is always heartbreaking. And to think of the sort of evil that people are capable of committing against one another is just awful, but also this sort of evil that we commit, how just aggressively awful we can be in these sort of situations. And I think the president really highlighted that yesterday when he gave his address. I saw Matt Walsh is just was just really so angry about it. He's like, the more that I think about it, the angrier I am, because you would think at a time like that when there's such a massive tragedy where 21 people were killed, 19 of them children, one of them was a teacher. And Biden knows what it's like to lose a child, which he did not mention call out his son, but he in his speech he did mention, what it's like to lose a child. And then he spoke for about 10 minutes. The first like two and a half, he was talking about how awful of a loss this was. And then like at the 240 something mark or something like that, it just automatically shifted into outrage and anger at the when are we going to stand up to the gun lobby? And I understand politics. I'm, within the game of it all. I understand. But I think there's times when political posturing is not appropriate. And I don't think that night was appropriate. And I think having constructive, they keep saying common sense gun reform, which many people have suggestions that won't work, don't work, or aren't very common sense, or just downright unconstitutional. And it seems that a lot of people, at the gist of it, really want gun confiscation. And there's some people outright calling for that. When when people talk about buybacks, mandatory buybacks, I'm like, I don't want that. But there are some more constructive things that we can actually come together and hopefully do. Um, but it's hard to make the case that people shouldn't have a bunch of guns when 2020 everyone was saying the police are awful and we need to defund them. Because once that started happening and crime started upticking and people were watching the riots and so on, do you know what happened? People started buying guns. People started buying guns, and there's crime waves everywhere. Not just because guns are the problems, but because we have all these soft DAs and so on who aren't really putting criminals away, or they're letting them plead down to a ridiculous amount or whatnot. in Florida, LA, all kinds of different places, and people are unsafe. Do you really think they want to be totally unprotected after you let us know that we shouldn't? Not only can we not trust the police, that we shouldn't trust the police. They are systemically racist. They have implicit bias. There is one sports guy. I don't know who he was, but people were talking about him because he went on a rant about what happened. But during like 2020, he went on a rant about how we shouldn't have police officers at schools because it makes black people feel bad or something. So a lot of people don't actually have very good constructive solutions to these things, and you'll never be able to stop them all. But they don't want to work in areas where they actually could make a bigger impact. So people aren't going to give up their guns when you make them just fish in a barrel. So there's that. But it just wasn't appropriate for Biden to go on that kind of tangent, especially with such animosity toward the gun lobby. A lot of people who are like super gun activists and libertarian type folks are that, that I know don't even like love the NRA. There's other groups that they like that are better, that are more protective of people's gun rights that they feel. But really, the gun lobby is just Americans who want to protect their Second Amendment rights, who are savvy and knowledgeable, far more knowledgeable than the people who want to take them away. And when people get to talking, they get to voting and they get to buying. So this lobby that they're pushing and trying to fight against, it's just the American people. It's just American people. And a lot of these folks do want to outright ban. I'm not saying that's exactly what Biden is suggesting. But when you use vague words like when you just say assault rifle, and it's like, what specifically do you mean by that? And you know, I had a friend who started their journey to being more conservative. They're not a Republican, but they were on the left. And someone just asked, they used the term assault rifle, and they said, "What do you mean by that?" And then she realized she didn't know what she was talking about. That she had no definition attached to this word. And a lot of people just think scary looking black gun. Steven Crowder did a video some time ago when he was at some kind of outside event and he had a booth. They had a couple different guns and they were asking people like, which guns do you think are okay? And the ones that were blacker were scarier to folks, even though the ones with like wood were like the same kind of gun or had like, I guess, deadlier look or more impactful sort of ammunition. But it looked scarier, so people had this perception that they were scary and worse, and that was an assault rifle and should probably not be allowed to have. So I can't say I'm disappointed in Biden because it's just what he does, but like about 2 minutes, it was about empathy. And I'm not saying it was a great speech or anything like that prior to getting into like the 3 minute mark, but it was about the grief of these families. And then it went just like, when are we gonna do something? And then the beginning was kind of low energy, and all of a sudden there was a little bit of spark for the anger of the folks who don't agree with them. So he really doesn't know how to rise to the moment as someone who pitched himself as a great unifier. And I don't expect him to change us all his positions, but if he could have just waited like a few days later before like coming out and like really pushing like some hard legislation like in the way that they do. I understand it's politics and he has an agenda. At least he could have done that. At least he could have done that. Just encourage the nation to pray for these families and urge. He could have heavily urged the right to come together with them to have some constructive sort of legislation moving forward. But this is the guy who calls, opposition same as Bill Connor and other stuff like that, Jim Crow 2.0. If you, want some people to show ID at the polls and stuff, and they're just a big racist. So disingenuous. Oh, speaking of disingenuous, I want to play what happened with Beto. There was a press conference, and he just decided to have a moment where he would bombard and make a, I guess, I don't know, a political stunt. It is obviously staged. When you there was a report about what happened behind the scenes and how people were like holding seats for him. So clearly a plot, and it just wasn't appropriate. He ended up getting told off by the mayor.
This is totally predictable. Sir, you're out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Sir, you are out of line. Please stop this. Sir, you exit. Get out. Get exit. Get out. Please. A tragedy happened here. We need to leave. This is not the place to do that.
Yeah, and so here's a little report on the background of that situation.
You were in the room. My goodness, could you make out what was being said by Beto O'Rourke?
Well, I did see what happened just before the press conference started. I was in the third row on the aisle, rather, and there were two people across the aisle from me, and a moment before the press conference started, they got up from their seats when Beto walked in. So they were seat holders for him, and then he sat down. So his presence wasn't really noticed in the 15 or 20 minutes that people were gathering inside because he was not in the room. So this seems something very clearly staged by Beto O'Rourke and his campaign wanting to confront the governor at this moment.
Is that appropriate? I know you're all watching and you're aware of the fact that it absolutely wasn't appropriate in that moment. And Beto is such a spineless, cowardly human being. He just is. And he jumps on these really progressive views. I don't know what he really believes in his heart about stuff, but being like, yeah, I'm going to take your guns and etc. Blah, blah, blah. That's what he was saying in 2020 when he was, trying to run, because he was trying to get that sort of, make a stake with those energized, young, progressive, really, really far left folks to cut out his little slice. Maybe raise cash, honestly. Maybe he knows that he's really not going to be going anywhere, but he can raise a lot of cash. He raised an insane amount of cash last time when he ran for governor. So even though obviously he lost, and hopefully he will lose again and worse than he did before. But he's someone who's like, they ask him about like women's reproductive rights, which of course we're talking about abortion, but they get like their euphemisms and don't like to mention that there's a baby involved because it's too complicated, messy, whatever. And Beto will just say like, it's a woman's choice. Even like talking about like 9 months, Beto will just go, it's a woman's choice. That's such a, and I know they think that's like a non-answer. That is not a non-answer. That's not a non-answer. They feel that is a way to sort of just give that up to a different authority, so to absolve them of saying something awful. But what you're saying is that if a woman deemed that she wanted to kill her baby like 5 minutes before it was born, that would be okay if it was her choice. That is a very radical position. But Beto just doesn't have the courage to say where exactly they stand on a month, a date, or a week, where they stand on that stuff. Or maybe they actually believe that 9 months is fine. Tim Pool made some people upset because he was like, if no one has 9-month abortions, then why can't people just say they're okay with banning them before 9 months if it doesn't happen? Why can't they just say that? Because fundamentally, I think they're okay with it. Not okay as in like it's something that they would like, I guess that would be a positive. But on the principle of the matter, yeah, they do believe that a woman should be able to do that. And by the way, 49 people in Senate, Democrats basically supported that. So Beto is just someone who just has decided to go down the super aggressive pander route and is just knows that the sort of people who like him and support him and will donate money, not just in Texas, like this is probably going to tick off a lot of people in Texas. There's people in his like group fangirls and whatnot who'll be fine with it, who say he's speaking truth to power and will cheer him on. There's plenty of people, even moderate Democrats, who think that was totally inappropriate. I hope most people think it's inappropriate, but those aren't the only dollars he's getting. He's getting a lot of dollars from people all over the country, just like he did before. So I don't even know if he's running with the true intention of knowing that he has a really good chance of winning, a really good shot of winning at all. I don't know if Beto really believes that, but he knows that he can raise a lot of money because that's a proven thing that's happened. Beto can raise a lot of cash. And I'm sure there's people who will be a lot of people are disgusted with his stunt, which is obviously a stunt. You have the media, CBS, admitting it was obviously a stunt when he did. It wasn't something that he just, outraged and couldn't help himself, so he started blurting stuff out. An obvious stunt. But people will get out their little checkbooks and be like, yeah, Beto, he did that thing. People out in California, New York, etc., hoping that they can pour in money to this person who hopefully has no shot of winning. Hopefully has no shot in winning, especially because people are not going to just want to get rid of guns in the way that Beto talked about. Yeah, I'm coming for your guns. He said that quite aggressively. You can't memory hole what he was the things that he said. They're on video. I've repurposed them for other videos, attack videos. As a matter of fact, you can't just forget those promises that he made. So he should really have no future in Texas politics. Not governing a state. But there's people who give him cash. So it was a stunt. But clowns like to perform. Clowns like to perform. Kudos on the mayor for telling him off. It's totally inappropriate. And a lot of people are totally inappropriate. I saw this this tweet from a user. They're not verified. This person is not verified, but they do have, I think it was 28,000 followers, and I don't know how recent all those followers and stuff are because this tweet went pretty viral. But they tweeted this about the father of one of the victims in Texas and was coming for them because I guess basically they think they deserved it. And so Matt Walsh called this person out. That's how I saw this tweet. And Matt was like, his child just died. Like, how dare you do this? And this person defended their tweet, saying this basically, when are these people going to learn? That they're so caught up in their ideology, but when are they going to learn? And then there were comments like, how can a Hispanic person be voting in Texas, be voting Republican? Maybe because they know that folks like you, person who said this, and person who tweeted this, maybe they know that you guys only care about them as long as they vote the way that you allow them to vote, that you think that they're supposed to vote. And if they think differently, then you tweet out crap like this in their time of need and national grief. People are sick. I shared this, I think, last night. But Ryan Petty, he was one of the parents who lost a child in Parkland. So he said, these people need our thoughts and prayers. It was the only thing that got us through that day. I don't know how, obviously this person's a bit religious. I don't know how extremely religious Ryan Petty is. But under his tweets, this is a man who's lived it. Not hard to figure out. If you hover over on his name on Twitter, you can see that he was a parent of one of the kids who was killed during Parkland. And people still had the audacity to trash thoughts and prayers, and as if they just do nothing, and it's just silly, and it's a cop out way to not do anything. So, by the way, I was working on an article. I'm about to drop it, but after I get off here, reflecting on thoughts and prayers, which, by the way, it's not the first time people came for thoughts and prayers. AOC, I think it was 2019, I wrote an article after AOC said something disparaging thoughts and prayers. In the war on thoughts and prayers, because people just really think it's a empty sort of phrase. It's not a promise to do nothing. As a matter of fact, when people who are religious, when they say I'm praying for you, they believe that they are doing something. So, just from my personal perspective, I reflected on my dad, and so he does a lot of missions, and he will go to the jungle if he has to. If you go to Antarctica, and I'm sorry, Antarctica, to preach to folks, he'll go wherever he feels the Lord is calling him to go. He's had to go to Pakistan and pass by Al Qaeda camps. I went to the Philippines with my three older siblings and my dad when I was into the 10th grade, and that was right after there was some terrorist stuff that had happened there. He's been to heavy cartel area in Mexico, wherever he feels that he needs to go. He's been in some nice places, but he's also been like in the poor slums of Kenya. He will preach to whoever, to the people in need. And in 2020, he was in need. He had, and I've talked about this before, but he got COVID. He was 63 at the time, and he's a heavy guy, and he had comorbidities enough, that he was definitely in the more high risk area. And so the day after the election, he went to the hospital, and he was in the hospital for at least a month, I guess. And then he ended up missing Thanksgiving. And then he came back sometime in December, and he ended up missing Christmas because he had a blood clot and they had to send him back. But he had a very, very rough time. And my mom said it was like being in an episode of House, because we talked to one doctor, one nurse, whatever. You hear one thing and then you talk to another, and then it was a totally different story. And at one point in time, it seemed like they were talking about sending him home, and then the next they're talking about he's like rushed into the ICU, and they put him on a ventilator. And then one day we're talking to him and it's fine, and then we can't reach him the next. And then we get a hold of a nurse and like, why isn't he answering his phone? And they're like, well, he's very confused. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't remember anything. And so my dad said he could remember like my mom a little bit, and they had some kids, but it was like he was waking up covered in blood, like the scene from Resident Evil after like Alice comes out of the, she wakes up after the umbrella like takes her and she pulls out her IVs and stuff. That's what was my dad was going through. He didn't know why he was in the hospital. He didn't remember why. And he would range from calling us very angry because no one was busting him out. And then he would, at times we'd call him and talk to him, and he would, like whimper on the phone talking about it's so hard, it's too hard. And my mom would just encourage him, like, Keith, you have to keep going, you have to keep going, you have to keep going. You have to, we're all praying for you. You have to hold on. You have to go to Mexico. She told him that she would go to Mexico with him, which my mom is very introverted, and she has not done that before. But one day my sister said, we were all speakerphone with him, and she's like, Dad, there's people all over the world who's messaging us, people who you've ministered to, who are praying for you, people in Pakistan, people on the Indian reservation in Calgary, people in Mexico, people in Kenya, everywhere. People are praying for you to get better. And so he really held on to that, and that really encouraged him, because he did want to continue doing his work and helping people and doing outreach to people. And so after they were ready to release him, and they aggressively suggested sending him to a nursing home, kind of threatened us a bit, because they were saying, well, it could look like you guys are refusing care if you don't listen to us, basically. And we're like, are you trying to like threaten to pull our insurance or something, or have insurance not pay for it? Like, it was really weird how much they really want him to go to a nursing home. But we pushed back, and they sent him home, and his body had atrophied. So he had to learn to kind of sit up and get out the bed and walk and everything. because his arms and legs were like flesh jelly. It was really, really weird. And so anyway, he worked to get better, and we worked with him. He was not the best patient, by the way. And by May, he was in Mexico preaching, and my mom went with him. So when people talk about thoughts and prayers, as a religious person and people are so aggressively against it, that really, really, I don't know, annoys me. I'm just like, I understand you're not religious, but you don't understand the people who are religious, that they believe that they are communing with an all-powerful being, at least petitioning on your behalf, and at least hoping that they comfort the families during these situations. Now, in the situation I described with my father, the fact that it wasn't just that we believed that the Lord was working on his behalf and helping him, etc., and that there was all these combined prayers, I guess, doing that, but it was very personal to him that all these people that he had impacted throughout his life, that he had sowed the seeds into their lives, and they're turning around and sowing back into him. Kind of like a, I don't know, circle of life sort of thing, I guess you could say. So when people say that thoughts and prayers don't mean anything and it doesn't mean anything to people, and they think it's just like absent noise, or at the very least, like, can't you just accept that people are empathizing with you? In the very least, take it for what that is. You don't have to be so needlessly angry with people. Even if you don't believe, and I understand people's emotions are high. Um, your emotions are not higher than the people who actually suffered the tragedy. Folks on the internet, FYI. So when we're actually doing thoughts and prayers, we believe that we are contributing. And what happened with my father was very, very hard for the family, because we do believe in prayer. And I've seen, a lot of miraculous things in my life that were instantaneous. I'm 100% believer. You could not convince me otherwise. Um, but obviously that didn't happen with this situation. It took time. It took a lot of fighting and perseverance. But the sort of miracles that we witnessed in this case didn't happen instantaneously. That happened over a lifetime of a man giving to people, sowing into people's lives, and them turning around and being kind to him, kind to our family. And it meant a lot to us. So to people like Ryan Petty, who's lost his child during that awful day with the Parkland shooting, saying that the thoughts and prayers helped them get through the day, why don't you just take them at his word? Why are people coming for him, and as if they believe we're all insincere? I understand a lot of people don't believe. A lot of people do. And at the very least, you could take it for well wishes. Now, saying thoughts and prayers and actually praying for people, that doesn't mean that you can't go out and do work. Mr. Petty, he actually went out and he's an activist for school safety. And I believe we can have constructive conversations about what we can do. And I think there's things that we actually can do. And I question why we haven't done them. But you don't need to needlessly trash people who genuinely want to help, people who genuinely feel. And as a Christian, I know that there is no promise in the Bible to never suffer, to never have loss. But I do know that there is a promise of a peace that passeth all understanding. So at the very least, or very most actually, when there's these type of tragedies, a lot of people are praying for comfort for them and peace for the families. Because how can you really wrap your head around a tragedy like this? And so a lot of people do really root themselves and ground themselves in faith, especially if they have faith prior. And I've seen a lot of loss from the past couple years, as a lot of people have. And there's been some pretty big titans of faith in my life who have um, inexplicably moved on. Um, but I can say I believe that faith helps. Just my 2 cents on the matter. Just my 2 cents on the matter. Just I just wish we could be kinder to each other in these types of circumstances. But unfortunately, it's so much of a political game to people. And I think it's because so many people hear thoughts and prayers and so on, and they think, but just as to them, Ben Shapiro said thoughts and prayers to the left is actually what we feel like just yelling out, like do something is, which a lot of people are tweeting that, and I think that trended at some point. Do something, but the question is, what are we going to do, and what is going to be constructive, and what's actually going to cause positive change? Now, we already talked about Biden a little bit in his speech, but there's some he tweeted out. As a nation, we must ask, what in God's name will when we stand up to the gun lobby? When in God's name will we do what needs to be done? I'm sick and tired of it. We have to act. So, okay. There's some people suggesting the obvious, that we make schools more secure and that you can go to gyms and other places that will have more security than where you send your vulnerable babies every day, where other people aren't supposed to have guns, so they are targets. These gun-free zones, you get someone in there, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. So there are people on the right who have suggested that teachers be armed. I'm actually a little iffy on that, because I understand from the perspectives of the teachers who do not want to be fish in a barrel and want to be armed. I understand that. There's definitely other teachers who don't want to do that themselves, would not want to be around, armed in that way. And also, we've been talking nonstop about crazy teachers, like for like the past couple of months. And if something bad happened after that sort of measure was passed, the political ramifications of that would be catastrophic, I think. I'm not sure if that's a foolproof sort of way to move forward with that. You can disagree with me. I'm just really kind of conflicted about that. I understand the argument. I just have my concerns. I think having single point entry security, maybe not just one person, because the school actually did have armed security. The gunman shot them and went past, but and then got in and barricaded themselves inside, and then went classroom on his killing spree. So it's not foolproof, especially if you just have one person, but you could have maybe a few. You just spent 40 billion sending it to Ukraine, and some people are questioning us. All Mike Cernovich questioning, like, you send all this money, but what can we, like, people have always said making these schools more secure is too expensive, but then we spend the money in other places. Now, I don't think the US has money. We have all these debts, actually. We just print more money, and it's like we're not in a good shape financially. But my point is that we spend money in other places that we may, and I'm not saying arguing totally against like foreign aid and other stuff like that. But for example, we spent a lot of money with COVID, and the bill that Biden passed, a lot of that cash wasn't for COVID, was for other projects. Some of it was spent in schools on diversity, equity, inclusion kind of stuff. So wouldn't it have been amazing if we actually directed some funds to making these schools more secure? That's a big bill. I understand that. But what other options are there going forward? I don't I mean, if people's tweet that we've had enough, like we got to do something. Why wouldn't be securing the schools be the obvious next move? Why wouldn't that be the obvious next move? Because you can't control all the factors for people being evil, being crazy, and doing crazy sort of things. Now, there are instances where you should have been able to do something. Like the Buffalo shooter, he had just said that he wanted to do like a school shooting, and he was like admitted and evaluated, and they didn't see anything wrong or whatnot. So they had a background check, like, so nothing's really popping up on the kid, but there was definitely issues, and that was in New York where they have strict gun laws. So, and this shooter in Texas, I read an article by the Washington Post, and they're going through his life. They said he was teased because he had a lisp and wore eyeliner, so people, I guess, would call him all sorts of gay slurs. I don't know if they were actually, in the LGBT community or not, which a lot of people were sharing a picture of a trans person, and it wasn't him. So please be careful with your spreading of fake news, guys. But different classmates were talking about how he would get violent, and apparently there was no father figure in the life. The mother allegedly had drug use. He had been getting into with the mother. The mother was talking about putting them out, and actually his grandmother, who he did shoot, by the way, was talking about evicting his mother because it was the grandmother's property. But there was a friend he had that noticed he had all these scratches on his face, and like, what's that from? Like, how'd that happen? And at first he was like, it's a cat, from the cat. And then he admitted that he did it to himself with knives, and he would go around like shooting at people with BB guns. So this was a disturbed person. And reading that article, I'm like, red flag after red flag after red flag. So there's a lot of things culturally, socially, that we need to change, but also we really need to do some stuff about mental health and making sure that if you're going to do background checks, that stuff is actually going to pick up and flag and stop that stuff. But just going after guns for law-abiding citizens so they can be less safe doesn't sound like that makes a lot of sense. But people are going to fail. Stuff's going to slip through the cracks. We've seen people, the FBI, look at different people and they're on their watch list or whatever, and then they, drop the ball or, slip through the radar or whatever, and then something happens. So even if you have a system, apparently it's not always going to work. So you could at least secure the schools more. It doesn't make sense that a lot of people go to the gym and it's the schools. Again, I understand that's expensive, but what are the options? Another thing, if the public schools can't do that, if that's just too astronomically expensive and unfathomable, and then there's people who are like, well, schools shouldn't have to be like that. I agree. We live in a sick-sad world, but does it mean you should let your kids be fish in a barrel? So I understand you don't like it. We should do it. But there are private schools who do have security. And you could support things like school choice and school vouchers so parents can have the option to send their child to a school that's a bit more safe. That's an option. There's rich people who are Democrats who get to send their kids to schools where they know there's going to be armed, guards. They don't expect stuff like that to happen. I mean, no one expects it to happen, but they certainly don't expect it to happen. And they themselves, by the way, have private security. So if you could make it so other people had the option to provide more opportunities for their children to go to places where there would be security like that, why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we do that? I mean, other than teachers' unions and the lobby to just protect public schools. And I graduated from public schools. I've been to not so great public schools, and I've been to one. The one I graduated from, I really did like that school. So I'm not trying to ream on all public schools or anything like that, but it's interesting when people mention that giving people options will bankrupt public schools, and it's like, are you saying if people had a choice, they wouldn't choose public school? So, I mean, we can make it so that it can compete with other options, but we could always empower the parents to make the decision on where they can send their kids for where they'll best be safe. Another option to homeschool your kids. There's some people mentioning this and people getting really upset about it. People push back and they're like, not everybody can do that. And people got to work full-time jobs. There are parents who work full-time jobs and they find a way to figure it out. Um, I know it's not an option. It seems like it's not an option for everybody, but obviously this wouldn't be something that you'd have to worry about if you were homeschooling your child. So that's just another option. Just wanted to throw it out there. I understand it's not for everybody. Just trying to have some constructive solutions. So, and people are pointing out like, well, that doesn't make people safer at grocery stores and all kinds of other places. That's true. But law-abiding citizens should have the right to carry and protect themselves in such situations. Again, you can't have this big defund police movement and talk about how awful and racist they are and implicit bias and all this other kind of stuff, and then just expect them to be the only ones with the power and authority to protect people, especially since cops do not have a constitutional obligation to actually protect you. That was went to the Supreme Court. Your self-preservation is in your hands. That's why you have the Second Amendment. One of the many reasons why you have the Second Amendment. So yes, you should take your life into your own hands and protect yourself and arm yourself and actually learn how to use the weapon. Don't be out here flailing around. But there's some people out here who are very confused about people like Tim Pool who are just like, I'm going to buy some more guns today. Because they're not willing to leave their lives in someone else's hands. And why should you be? It is your responsibility. It is your responsibility. And I'm not anti-police. I like the police and I want them to be able to call them and them to show up within 5 minutes. But you know what? There's places where they're definitely not getting there within 5 minutes. And then if you're in a really bad situation, you may not have 5 minutes. You may not have 5 minutes. So those are a couple of suggestions. At least that I have. Other people can let me know what they think. To add to the conversation, certainly. But disarming law-abiding citizens ain't gonna be it. And Biden continuously talking about the gun lobby ain't gonna be it. Again, the power of the gun lobby is just so many U.S. citizens. So many U.S. citizens. I'm not saying they don't raise money, all kinds of other stuff, but really is that people are passionate about their Second Amendment rights, and it is a right. And when there was one particular legislation or something that Democrats were talking about pushing, and this might have been back in 2015, 2016, something like that. And I went to the website and they had it all out, like, hey, we can send a letter on your behalf. You fill out the information, and they make it pretty easy, and have some information for you to follow. But they rely on the fact that people are informed and passionate about protecting their rights. And that is an inconvenient fact for President Biden and Democrats. But it's a lot easier for them to just blame an organization like the NRA, like they're the ones withholding so much power, when there's a ton of lobbies out here that have more funding and a sort of bigger machine than the NRA. The NRA benefits off the fact that so many people just know their stuff and want to protect their rights. Allie Stuckley had a great thread about what she feels is how we failed society. And a lot of ills that we've had. I'm trying to find it real quick, because I like to read it to you guys, because I really thought it was on point. 1 second. Because we really do have an issue with how we're raising up people in the US. We have a lack of fatherhood like this man had. Apparently, like I said, the mother had a drug problem as well. There were some people, one person in the article said they tried to kind of reach out and be a bit of a father figure, but I don't know how much this young man got help with as far as his mental health. There was people around him, which I understand some of them were kids and they were concerned about stuff that they were hearing. But man, you got to reach out when you hear crazy stuff like some of the stuff that they were doing. I mean, it was just really bizarre to hear that someone's like cutting themselves with knives. But people will keep that kind of stuff secret. And I'm not trying to blame anyone, but I'm just saying we have to try to not let stuff like this slip through the cracks. I don't know if I can find it. She had, well, I know, I think I liked it in my Facebook. I thought I retweeted it, but it was such a good thread from Allie Stuckley and the ills of society. And Ben Shapiro was talking about it, and Matt Walsh was talking about it. A lot of people are just pointing out that we as a society, that we're not doing right by people. And a lot of people talk about mental health, and I'll say this, but I do not think we are a society that actually helps people with mental health. And I know we've done a lot to remove the stigma as far as talking about mental health. But we are a society that instead of getting to the root of problems and then trying to fix it within ourselves, we push affirmation so hard. Like, you don't have to get healthy for your body and stuff. That's fat phobic, right? I know the irony, guys. You don't have to mention it. But I don't go around saying fat pride. So there's the transgender issue that if you don't believe someone like Leah Thomas is a woman, you are a hateful bigot. If you're not okay with someone flashing their penis around in locker rooms and spas and stuff, then you're a bigot. If someone goes to the doctor and says, I feel like I'm a boy, give me a double mastectomy and chopped off my breasts and give me hormones and stuff, people can do that very quickly. Very quickly. And I've talked about this often, but there was a video on 60 Minutes about a young girl who believed that she was a boy, like, oh, maybe that's that. They're researching, people are talking about, being trans and stuff. They're like, oh, maybe that's what I have. They go to the doctor or whatever. Psychiatrists don't really push on it, get back against it, I guess, in the US anymore. And they go ahead and they get their surgery done, and they start taking hormones, and they start transitioning, realized, oh shoot, this did not solve my issues and my problems, and detransition, and it was all within the span of a year. And then you have Biden, the president of the United States, getting on air talking about how if you want to show love as a parent of a trans child, then you will affirm their identity. And then the White House puts out a graph talking about how all the ways that you can affirm your child's identity, which includes changing their clothes, letting them have hormones, puberty blockers, and even surgery. So those are the sort of things that people are pushing, but there's so many people who have different sort of issues that we're not really questioning and getting to the root of, because we're so hell-bent on just affirming. And you can't question people. Like, and so many people are just convinced that they are right in the moral arbiters of truth, to the point where they don't even want to have a conversation with someone else and just even consider that they could be wrong about stuff. Like, it's amazing folks on the left are just like, well, we're the party of empathy. You think no one on the other side has any sort of empathy, caring, and feeling about any other people at all? That doesn't even make sense. Like, if you think about it, does that make sense? But you have to be so right in your own mind that you can't even question at all. So I don't think we're a society that we can talk about mental health and the need for mental health And we do have a dire mental health problem. But are we a society that really wants our society to be mentally healthy? The abortion discussion is wild to me. People keep telling me that we just need more sex education, which I find that to be ridiculous because 80%, more than 80% of abortions are for women in their 20s and 40s. So that's not why we have over 600,000 abortions every year, because people don't know that sex can lead to pregnancy. But what would sex education actually do at this point in the way that they'd want to teach it? Because the new thing is to say that consent to sex isn't consent to pregnancy. Okay, well, I guess you can't say like, "Hey, baby, I know I've done the deed, but it's okay for you to implant now." No, I guess you can't do that, but you can't agree that a woman can control not getting pregnant, correct? Like from not having sex and whatnot. Like we can agree, like that's a thing, right? I don't know if people would agree with that, but if that's the way that they want to teach that, just because you do the action that of procreation and it leads to a pregnancy, like sort of like the natural sort of way it's all supposed to work, that you are still absolved of responsibility because you didn't consciously make it happen, even though you knew what could happen. And because you didn't want it to happen, then you are morally in the clear to terminate that human life. Do you think we're interested in having a healthy society? I don't think so. I don't think so in the least bit. So I found Allie's thread. She said, "We seem to be horribly failing the young men in this country. That's the one commonality in the vast majority of mass shootings. It's not race or ideology, they're young males. We are doing absolutely everything wrong when it comes to promoting healthy masculinity, purpose, and goodness for these boys and men. If we really cared, we would be doing everything we can to promote fatherhood, hard work, and honor. We'd be getting these boys off the internet and into hobbies and jobs and communities where they can channel their strength. We'd be desperately pushing them toward meaning. Our denial of innate gender differences, coupled with the demonizing of masculine strength, don't help. There is nothing more dangerous than a man with nothing to do and no one to live for. There's also nothing more beneficial to a community than a man with purpose and love. It's much easier to offer meaningless political talking points than it is to reckon with the societal spiritual rot that has eroded our foundations and our connections. And most people don't see it because they are contributors to the moral deficit our country faces. Maybe we should ask, what are our churches, schools, organizations, neighborhoods doing to address this problem? How are we helping fatherlessness, purposeless boys? Many are already doing good work. We can all do more. There truly has to be a moral revolution, a radical recalibration of our values, a great awakening for anything to change, impossible without the grace of God and a whole lot of effort on our part." Um, so, and then she tweeted out some stuff about the shooter, about how he was his neighbor Ruben Flores 41 said that he had a pretty rough life with his mother and that he had tried to be a father figure to the teen. And she said fatherlessness is one of the biggest threats we face. She's not wrong. She's not wrong. Actually, she's very right. And a lot of this stuff I've said, and people do not realize how fulfilling meaning and purpose and responsibility is in people's lives and how much people need it. And we are a society that rejects those things, totally rejects those things in our political sphere, culturally. We reject those things. I mean, that's all the abortion debate is really about, a rejection of responsibility. Like the consent to sex and consent to pregnancy, come on. And if you look at the numbers, majority of abortions are from unwed women. Like I said, they're from 20 to 8, about more than 80% are from ages 20 to 40. So you can't say it's because people don't know that sex leads to pregnancy. So it's there's people who cite that they have abortions for financial reasons, but that doesn't mean that they would be destitute if they had a baby. Poor people find a way to survive, man. We're very resourceful. you know, I know a lot of people on WIC who hustle, the crap out of that kind of stuff. So, and that you can't kill babies because of economic status, man. That's eugenics, right? Um, I think the problem really, really stems from the fact that people do not value commitment, people do not value responsibility, and people do not realize how much meaning can come into your life when you allow someone else into it that you have to really care for, like a child. This is the last thing I think I want to say, but I saw a video the other day of this 19-year-old girl on TikTok, and the beginning, she was just kind of dancing and she had words over it, like kind of explaining everything. And so she said she's been dating someone for 4 years. She's like, when you're dating for 4 years and you love kids, and then the words change and lifts up her shirt and shows that she has a pregnant belly, and then she's like pregnant at 19. And so there's some people who are like, oh, we're happy for you, etc., blah blah blah. But there was quite a few comments that were like, oh, you're too young, you'll find out who's really taking care of this baby, etc. Now, as you guys are aware of, and I pointed out in this episode, I'm very, very Christian. So I believe that frankly no one should be having sex outside of marriage. So she is engaged to the young man now, but it troubled me reading the comments of people talking about how she just wasn't ready for it and she's too young to be a mother, because I'm like, but they wouldn't say that she was too young to be sleeping around with this person at 19. You know, and there's a lot of people who are 19 out here, sleeping around and stuff. But they wouldn't chastise that. I didn't see any comments that they're too young to be sleeping around. I saw comments that she's too young to be a mother. And I'm like, but the baby's already here. And she wants it. And the family is apparently happy. She's getting married. So she has more sense than a lot of people, out here not having shotgun weddings, I guess. And statistically, she's going to be giving her child a much better chance at success than a lot of folks who are, who decide to do it single. So I'm just like, what other options are there? Because would they like applaud her if she was like, oh, I'm too young, let me go ahead and have an abortion? I just didn't understand what people wanted out of this girl at this point, when there's a baby bump. She wasn't holding a pregnant stick and saying, oh, I just found out or something. She had a bump. She was showing. So at that point, and she was skinny. At that point, what do you want her to do? But people saying you're too young you're too young. Would they have been okay if she was like, I had an abortion? They were like, that was your choice. I mean, she's choosing someone that she's been in a relationship with for 4 years. I don't know how stable it's been or whatever. I don't know their economic background. I don't know if she had other aspirations in college or she's still going or whatever. All I know is she's engaged now and she's pregnant. And she's going to choose commitment to her future husband and responsibility to her child. Again, I don't like the order and all of it happened. But much better than the alternative of what these women are fighting for on Capitol Hill. People, maybe they felt that they're just too young because, well, maybe they know they were like at 19. I'm not saying they weren't young. I mean, he's young enough to go off to war, be drafted into war. And again, they don't think they're too young to be sleeping around. But so much of life and growing up is a part of assuming responsibilities. You know, you can be as old as you want to be, but there's people out here who act childish because they won't assume any accountability or responsibility for stuff. Those are like the worst people. Everything is everyone else's fault. And they do for themselves what they won't do for other people. But when you're grown up, sometimes you have to put other people first. So they'll learn. They'll grow up very quickly, hopefully. But it's not wrong for them to take responsibility for their actions. I was just really disgusted by some of the comments. It was really wild to me. Really wild to me. Continue send prayers to the families. Hearing stories about the reunification centers where families were getting together to hear the news on whether they lost a child or not, and then hearing just wails, collective wails of parents and siblings and grandparents who lost loved ones. It's just heartbreaking. I haven't had to hear something like that in real life, and I'm guess I'm grateful for that, but I just can't imagine. I mean, I guess you could imagine it, but you just have to probably hear that in real life to know how much that can ache. Just reading tweets about it aches. And I would encourage people to, if you can go to the Red Cross, donate blood. A friend of mine, this is Savvy, did a video just, encouraging people how you can help. People lost a lot of blood there. I believe there was a really bad shortage. Is it still as bad as it was? Because they're Red Cross was calling my sister like every day at one point, but she's pretty anemic. So a lot of times it doesn't work out. Low iron and stuff. So go ahead and you can donate that way, but continue sending thoughts and prayers to these families and really push people to secure schools. And if someone could explain to me why that's not the push, that would be great. Because that seems like the most obvious thing that people should do. Especially after all this time. Thank you guys for joining me today on Black Tea News. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. I know it was a lot more somber and serious than usual. Make sure that that you are being careful in what sort of information that you are spreading. There are some people who I know who've got caught up in sharing some fake news. I thought I had shared some the other night about, because I shared a tweet, and then people were like, thought there was only handguns and not rifles. So people were like correcting me, and I was like, I'm like, oh shoot, I better issue an apology. I was like, wait a second. And then I'm like, research. I'm like, I'm not wrong. So yeah, be careful about what information that you share. We want to make sure it's accurate so people can have the most available information so we can come up with constructive solutions and not just virtue signal to each other. And these sort of things are tragic, so I understand emotions being high, but if you don't know something, you don't have to you can be limited with what you talk about, so you're not spreading misinformation and just trying to fill in gaps and whatnot. So I just encourage people to be responsible with these sort of things. I didn't tweet a lot about it last night, retweeted some stuff, didn't write a lot on Facebook because I like to wait till I know some more information. And I do that with most cases like this because I really hate to admit that I'm wrong. So I try not to be wrong. I try not to be wrong. But keep families in your prayers. I know some people don't like that, but as I said, I think it means a lot to a lot of people. And a lot of people really need faith in these sort of moments. And Joe Biden, he quoted a scripture about how in his address, how the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and save those who are crushed spirit. That's out of Psalms, the 34. So at least he did something that was good in that address, but it was mostly trash. Mostly trash. Please go to blacktnews.com. Check out different content I have on my website. I do thank Brighter Michigan PAC. I'm in their studio today. If I said something today that triggers you, they don't care. I don't care. It doesn't really work like that, but they just appreciate. I appreciate having the space, and they like to uplift conservative voices. So check out different gear on the website, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.